Hello and welcome to the presentation of my proposal to design an e-learning course on the topic of managing underperformance in the workplace. I will take you through the context of designing this course, the aims and objectives, underlying structure of the system, and some examples of activities and screenshots. Finally, I will explain some of the theories of learning that the proposal is based on. Imagine that these are two friends who are managers in different organisations. They meet in a local cafe to discuss the problems each of them are having with staff who are not performing as well as needed. If only they had access to an e-learning course on managing underperformance, then they would spend less time wondering what to do and more time getting their team's performance to full strength. So, who is the target audience for this course? Well, broadly, it would be anyone who manages people as part of their job, regardless of which sector or size of organisation. There are three subgroups though. Newly appointed managers who've had no training yet do face the day-to-day situation of managing staff who might underperform. Experienced managers who may have had training in the past but now need a refresher, perhaps because they've taken on a bigger job. And managers who need to tackle an issue of underperformance with one of their staff now. They need support, help and training immediately. So you may be asking why e-learning is the proposed solution. Well, large organisations with healthy training budgets can often provide plenty of face-to-face training workshops as well as support from a large human resources department. However, smaller organisations don't have these kinds of resources and may not be able to justify in-house training for just a handful of managers. Also, managers everywhere tend to have many conflicting pressures on their time, and getting away from the workplace for a few hours or even a full day of training would be unrealistic. Add to that the geographical dispersal of the target audience and the fact that many of them travel for their job and spend time away from their base, and the flexibility of an e-learning course gives a real advantage. Here's the aim of the proposed course. You'll see there's two aspects. The confidence part is about the emotions that many managers feel when having to deal with an underperforming member of staff. They can be fearful of the consequences and nervous. The skill part is more about how to do it legally and with the greatest impact on the staff's behaviour improving. Out of that aim falls three objectives. The guidelines would be to use immediately as well as to refer back to later. The confidence means that the learner is able to take action in an emotionally charged situation. And the further help and guidance gives access to continued support and additional material if needed. The overall structure of the course is in 4 sections, which can be accessed in any order dependent on the learner's need and preference. The organisation's policy section has activities designed to guide the learner in finding out about their particular organisation's HR policies and procedures. It would be tailored to the particular organisation. However, for those learners in smaller organisations without HR departments, this section would refer to best practice guidelines. The frequently asked questions section would have a keyword search tool, enabling the learner to address the specific areas that they need to learn more about. The simulations section is less about knowledge, as the previous 2 sections are, but more about skill and confidence. This is set in a simulated work environment, where the learner's actions with particular characters roll out to different consequences. The further help and guidance section provides links to useful websites on topics such as employment legislation and bodies such as ACAS, as well as further learning such as audio podcasts. Here's a mock-up of the home page screen. A friendly guide helps the learner to navigate their way around, as many will approach the course with a degree of caution or fear, and also may not have taken an e-learning course before. The whole course works like an office building, so the home page is the foyer with a set of elevators. At any point, the learner can return to the foyer to take a different elevator to a different section. Different floors have different subsections. When the learner rolls the mouse over the elevator letters, an explanatory pop-up box appears. The course uses a cast of characters to bring realism to the learning. 4 different staff members each have their own underperformance issues, and their stories unfold as the learner tackles them in different ways. Here's a drag and drop game that would appear in the section on the organisational policies. Different situations appear, relating to one of the characters, and the learner has to decide whether it's an issue of capability or conduct. When they get it right, the computer tells them, as a way of motivating them to continue and reinforcing the learning. There would be a library of different examples relating to the 4 characters. If a learner drags it into the wrong area, then the computer explains more about the difference between capability and conduct, and then rectifies the error. The simulated environment could be adapted to match the learner's reality. There could be a selection to choose from: factory, shop, office, warehouse, or organisations with the budget available could have an environment tailored to their particular business. Do you remember the martini adverts in the 1980s? Well, the idea of anytime, any place, anywhere will also apply to this e-learning course. The material will be available for access on handheld devices, so that bite-sized chunks to be taken whenever a manager needs to. And some of the further help and guidance will be available through audio podcasts that the manager can listen to whilst commuting or moving between locations. This accessibility helps with the transfer of learning, as a manager can remind themselves of important points just before a meeting with a member of staff, or as preparation for a conversation with the HR department. Enough of the course design. What about the underpinning theories? Well, I've used 2 as the foundation stones. I've used situated learning because of the authenticity I wanted to bring. Managers could then believe in the learning in the social context that they have to use it in. Cognitive psychology also provided me with the thoughts of maintaining attention with busy managers through the novelty and things like animation, keeping their motivation up through individualised challenge by learning which of the characters they want to deal with and having control over which section they do, and the simulation, case-based learning and handheld device learning helps to facilitate transfer. What about each section though? How do learning theories apply to that? Well, the organisational policy area will have primarily behaviouristic activities, as there are right and wrong answers. The simulations area is more constructivist in nature, as the learner explores actions they can take and the consequences of that. The frequently asked questions and further help and guidance is based on the assumption that adults like learning to be more problem solving. How about learning styles? Well, using Honey and Mumford's learning styles, the simulation part will be preferred by the activists, whereas reflectors will appreciate the self-paced nature of the whole course and the space to think between activities. Theorists will prefer the organisational policy part with the guidelines and rules, and pragmatists will prefer the frequently asked questions and further help and guidance, as they can immediately put things into action. I've used 3 main sources for the theories behind this course. Here they are. 2 are books and 1 is web-based. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my proposal. I hope I've persuaded you that this is a project worth investing in.